Good morning and welcome back to the CDS VOD reviews. This week we were fighting Mafraju, or Mafraju, or Mafraju. Everyone has been pronouncing it differently. I feel bad for Mafraju, but, you know, this is what happens when you have a name that people pronounce differently. I'm used to it. There are like 6 people that call me Spidz, and I don't understand why. I'm pretty sure it's Mafraju. But, or Mafraju, but I'm sorry. It just irritates me because Jansport is like very adamant that it's Mafraju, and then Pink Ghost in all of the videos there's like Mafraju, and I don't know what to do. But the montage will be after this section. I'm testing something new. I wanted to do this last time, but I decided not to do it at the very last minute. But I got one person saying please do the montage after this thing, because like if only competitive people care about this content, then like it doesn't matter when the montage is. But I personally prefer the montage at the start because I think it's more attention seeking. I would struggle to watch a YouTube video where the montage isn't at the front and then I have to sit through like 30 minutes of someone talking, and then I'm expected to look at the screen, and then I'm expected to like only half look at the screen during like the VOD review section, right? So I'm unsure. If you've got any thoughts about this versus what it was like yesterday, please let me know. But we're gonna put the montage after this section, and I've done it this way this week, and I've tested it this week, and I think it works this week especially well, which is why I think this is the best week to test putting the montage after the first section. But like always, let's compare the champs. We've got 47 slides today, so you're going to be here for a while. Let's compare the champs. Dali Brazil had Nora Sejuani, Kindred Viego, Ezreal Draven, Pyke, Tryndamere, Rek'Sai, and Nasus. What you'll notice is that they've got Nora, they've got 2 SIs, 2 Freljords, they've got Lurk, and they've got a bunch of random stuff. I think they've got one of the scariest lineups. I think I've said this a few times, but this is definitely like, they had that Nora that they managed to draft, and they've got like real decks. And that's pretty nerve-wracking, right? While we've obviously got Gwen, Gnar, Pantheon, Varus, Alawi, Fiora, Darius, Shen, Taric. If we compare the champions, I expected Nora, Viego, Lurk, and Ezreal Sejuani. This was their lineup for the last 2 weeks in a row, and these are the decks that I know they just like. Like, the very little I know about this individual, these are the decks they like. I also know they're a big fan of Ezreal Draven. So other options I could have seen were obviously Ezreal Draven, as well as 2 of the decks from above. Or if they really wanted to go for like a very specific anti-thing, like anti-me thing, you could definitely go like Sej, Viego, FTR, Kindred, Tryndamere, FTR. I've chosen these because like I think Kindred is stronger than these other champions, and you want Kindred and Tryndamere together and then Sej and Viego together. That was just my logic for that. You could just go double FTR and then like a third deck, but I expected Lurk and Ezreal Sejuani, so I wanted to go with 3 counter decks. Go Hard is one of my favorite cards in LOR. I'm a massive fan of Go Hard, so seeing an opportunity that Go Hard would beat Lurk because you get to ping off all their little nonsense units, and it can beat Ezreal Sejuani because you just don't play any units and they can't freeze your stuff and you win. I thought 2 Go Hard decks and then Yordles might be a great way of beating Lurk and Ezreal Sejuani. So let's start. The first deck is Go Hard Noxus, and this is about what we were scrimming with most of the time with Go Hard Noxus. You got 3 Gwen, 3 Darius, 1 Ceaseless, 3 House Spider, Arachnoid Sentry. These are like your only units, as well as like the Vile Feast and Unspeakable Horror and sort of Conservatory for the Tibalt, but you don't really have any units in this deck. And the main way you just win is, and I think this deck's pretty well known, if you just replace Darius with like Katarina, the deck will look pretty familiar, or Annie or something. You play your Conservatory, you play your Catalogue of Regrets, you stall out the game with Go Hards and Vile Feasts and Undergrowths. Once you play Tibalt, you sort of just win the game, because all of your units kill extra things. It's a pretty understandable deck. Ceaseless Entry being a new addition is kind of cute. Let's quickly look at Lurk before we go through Lurk, because there are some cards that I want to quickly point out in Lurk. Namely, the 2 Ruthless Predator, the 1 Rite of Negation, the 1 Bloodbait, and the 1 Bone Skewer. I think these are just important things to keep in mind when I'm talking about how these matchups were going in scrims. Go Hard Noxus. How do we beat Lurk? And I think the best way to look at Lurk is as 3 different unit types. You've got cheap 1 to 3 HP units. So these are Sharkling, Xerxai Hatchling, Redfin Hammersnout, Snapjaw Swarm, Xerxai Caller, and Pyke. You've got these mid-cost 5 and 6 HP units. These are your Xerxai the Undertitan, Xerxai Doombreaker, and Rek'Sai. And then you've got your Jewelfish, right? Which is just, it's just Jewelfish, right? Like, it can't be compared into any of the other situations, right? And what you want to do is you want to have, as a control deck, a plan for all 3 different types of units. So, for the small HP units, you've got Go Hard, Unspeakable, Vile Feast, Undergrowth, and House Spider. These absolutely just deal with all of these small units. If they play Zerzai on one, you've got Go Hard on one, and they have the attack token, they are not only missing out on leg, you're progressing your own win condition and dealing with their board. It's just beautiful, right? When you have stuff like Catalog as well, you can do stuff like Vile Feast on 4, then play Catalog, and then have Vile Feast on 5. You're not only killing one of these 2 HP units, but you're also developing 2 blockers. It just works really well against these early units. Gets a little bit tougher when you go into Zerzai, Doombreaker, and Rek'Sai. While you do have Flock, Disintegrate, Piercing Darkness, and Vengeance to deal with these are less copies of these cards, and you need to have your Flock combining with the Go Hard. You need to have your Flock combining, Go Hard to combining with the Disintegrate and these sorts of things. You've got Darius and Conservatory, which block, right? You'll take like 3 or 4 damage maybe, but they will block and kill whatever's attacking them, which is, it's good enough if they tap under like Pike Spell or Bone Skewer, for example. You've got Pack Your Bags, which also can deal pretty well, and you've got your One of Sentry that just sometimes will stop them, especially against Rek'Sai particularly. But you've got your plan against your mid-level units. At this point, you should also probably have Catalog or at least a Conservatory ticking down, and provided you can deal with 1 or 2 of these with Vengeances, Piercing Darknesses, Disintegrates, whatever, you will feel fine. Sorry, accidentally deleted this slide, but the final thing is that against Jewelfish, if everything is still gone badly, you didn't have any of your landmarks, you didn't kill enough units, they had 2 Overwhelm units, and then they play Jewelfish, and they forced to play Jewelfish because of the way you've developed the board, such that they need to kill your Tibalt or your Gwen or your Darius. You play Ruination, and the Jewelfish and their other units are gone. This matchup feels amazing, and it's one of the ones I was most confident in going into this. Let's quickly look at Ezreal Sejuani. There's a few things I want to point out, namely that they don't have any draw. They've only got Time Trick and Static Shock, but they're not actually running any Progress Day, any Formula, any Drum Solo, which are cards that I think should be ran in this deck. In addition, they actually don't have big removal in this deck. They've got Thermo Beam, which is sort of big removal, but it's Thermo Beam. Like, it's not the most reliable form of big removal, and you have to play around it a lot. And then you've got stuff like Harsh Winds and Freeze, which stall big things, but if you just stick like a 4 health unit on the field, they can't really do all that much about it. Obviously, this whole thing is about using the imbue keyword as well as a bunch of things, and just like imbuing it up, and then eventually you have like a 10-13 Ezreal or something, or a Sejuani that tries to beat you down. I don't think this deck is built how it should be built. There's a lot of cards that I think should be in this deck that aren't. But how do we beat Ezreal Sejuani? One thing is that they only run 1 Aftershock. So if we get 2 or 3 landmarks, we're just going to win, right? Like, they can't deal with Tibalt. Tibalt will just scale them immensely, and we're going to have so much healing and kill spells that if we just stick a Tibalt, we're fine. They have to also probably get rid of Catalog of Regrets, only because if I keep cycling my Go Hards and my Vile Feasts, it'll just work. It'll just make things occur. And I think this slide also shows just very well how this matchup ends up going. If they play Feel the Rush, we've got Ruination. That's okay. For Thermo Beam, we've got Gwen and Darius and Conservatory. They can only Thermo Beam so much, and if you're playing around Thermo Beam properly, you're going to make it so that their Thermo Beams don't feel amazing, right? Against what Starlit Seal will buff, we've got Disintegrate and Vengeance. So if they have some sort of like 12-something unit, we can just Disintegrate or Vengeance it, and they don't run any like Syncopation or Deny or Spell Shield. So it will just die. And the last thing that I think is a little bit tongue-in-cheek is that we're running 3 Whispered Words, and they're not running any draw. So we will also outvalue them if the landmarks still aren't enough. This is the deck I was most comfortable with, the Go Hard Noxus deck. This is the one that I honestly expected to be banned. But this is where we started with the lineup. Going from that, we said that Go Hard is a really good strategy into their decks. So we thought, okay, let's do Go Hard Bilgewater. We do Alawi, Thresh. We've got 2 Catalog of Regrets because I think in this version, you might need... Getting 3 Catalog of Regrets might be a little bit too many when you can't justify like the Tibok stuff, right? Like, you will have situations where you draw 2 catalogs and you don't feel as happy with it compared to the other deck, where at least you've got the flux to get you losing card advantage but getting a lot of removal, right? You can't do that as much with this deck. That's why we've only got 2 Catalog of Regrets, because we don't have the flux to sort of catch us up on tempo if we have too much card draw. We do get to run more Ceaseless and Mirai Wardens and Saps Bravefins. This does use a bit more units in terms of trying to be defensive in that sense, akin to that of what Flock was trying to do. And that is also because we're trying to make sure Hate Spike can be proc, because Hate Spike does very similar things, where it can destroy Pike and it can destroy the 3 health units. In addition, if you look at the Ezreal Sejuani, right, like their main win conditions are all 3 health, like Ballistic Butt, Puffcat Peddler, and like Starlit Seer, they all die, or they die in quotes to hate spike. The theory is that they're going to free something of yours, like your Alawi, and then they tap under, and then you can hate spike one of those units. Aside from that, this is pretty understandable. We're down on Ibnakake Barasa only because I kept finding situations where we get two Ibnakake Barasas and we have too many cards in hand and just not. We just have too many cards in hand, but not enough like tempo or anything. Like we couldn't deal with their stuff quick enough. But again, Lurk has 3 types of unit: cheap 1 to 3 health, mid cost 5 and 6 health, and Jewelfish. Against this cheap stuff, it's very similar. You replace House Spider with Mirai Warden, and instead of Undergrowth, we have Hate Spike. Why? Not entirely sure. I think we could have probably had Undergrowth in this slot, but for some reason, when we were building it, we had Hate Spike there. We also have 1 less Unspeakable Horror, but for some reason, I just thought, we're going to run Hate Spike this time. Probably not the best decision, but... And I only realized this when making the slides, but yeah, Hate Spike was there. But it's still a very similar, like, thought process, right? We're trying to destroy their things in... Like, deal with these units early on with your Go-Hards, your Unspeakables, your Vile Feasts. Alright, against this stuff, you're going to notice that this is starting to look a lot different, but it's okay. Against these units, we do have Piercing Darkness and Vengeance. We've got Alawi and Thresh, which is sort of like the Tibulk and the Darius. They're big units that can block a little. And you can combine them with stuff like your Hate Spikes or, I don't know, your, like, 2 Go-Hards, and they'll slowly get chipped away. You've got Pack Your Bags again, and instead of Arachnoid Sentry, you have Riptide, very specifically for Rek'Sai, but also for stopping Zerzareth and Zerzai Doomebreaker, right? It's a lot more like Concussive Palm in that sense. And then against Jewelfish, we still have Ruination. So, you know, all is well. Go Hard Noxus. How do we beat Ezreal Sejuani? You'll notice that last time, Aftershock was able to deal with these landmarks, but this time, Aftershock is actually able to deal with these landmarks. Like, Aftershock can't deal with too many landmarks. It's just one Aftershock. Conservatory and Regrets. If you just keep 2 or 3 of them, you will probably win. It's not as reliable here, but that's sort of okay. We're sort of still able to deal with them. We've got Ruination for Feel the Rush. We've got Alawi and Thresh, which again, they need to be prepping Thermo Beam properly. We've got Hate Spike instead of, and I think under there is Disintegrate. Hate Spike this time kill Starlit Seer before they can try and get stuff up. And we still have that draw, right? And I could have picked Glimpse Beyond in this spot as well. Like, we've got the draw that allows us to sort of deal with Ezreal Sejuani, right? So for now, all is well. It's definitely weaker than the Noxus version, but what we found was that it was just slightly edging our way towards there. We had the opportunity to beat their stuff. Thresh obviously can also kill the Starlit Seer and stuff. So like if you stick Thresh, they're forced to keep freezing Thresh, and you still outvalue them, right? As long as you keep your Vengeance for things like the buffed up Ezreal, and you have ways of dealing with Ezreal, and Sejuani, like you will slowly outgrind them. Like it looks worse, but you can outgrind them. Right, just because they don't run any draw, so outgrinding them is a reliable strategy. Yordles. This is the Yordle stack. You can tell it really is a Yordle stack. We've got Papyro and Yordle Explorer. Like, this is Yordles. And it surprisingly does pretty decently, right? Lurk has 3 types of unit. Cheap 1 to 3 HP units, mid-cost 5 and 6 HP units, and Jewelfish. So, against the early units, you've got Yordle Explorer, Yordle Smith, Pepper the Great, and Banana Blaster. These, you just aggro them, right? They're at some point, they are forced to block your Yordle Explorer and your Yordle Smiths, right? You've got Mobilize and Inspiring Light to try and go wide and deal with their nonsense, right? Like, you get to block once or twice, but more importantly, when you attack on turn 4, with Yordle Smith, Yordle Explorer, maybe a Squire or a Chemist, maybe a Conchologist, maybe a Stone Stackers, you're dealing about 8 to 10 damage, maybe even 11 or 12, and they all have quick attack. But they can't justify just taking all of this damage because they will take this damage on the next turn. And while they can start like trying to pressure you and get their own go wide win condition, if they're going wide enough, you can often trade into their Sharklings, but just make this work, right? I know I'm not being like particularly descriptive, but generally speaking, though you end up being like 5 wide or so by turn 4, turn 5, right? Probably turn 4. And they might have 3 units, they might have the 4 units, but they're also forced to block, and your things are large, and if you have a Mobilize down it, it's even just like, it's so much worse for them. But Okay. How do you deal with the Zerzerath, Doombringer, and Rek'Sai? And the answer is you put them down to 6 HP, you take the damage, and you kill them on the next turn, right? They spent so much mana on developing one unit, you can develop two or three, and you just win. Jewelfish, they're dead, right? Like, they should die by the time they're playing Jewelfish. That's how this deck is built. Ignore the Fiora, almost ignore the Gnar, to be honest. It's pretty much just the units as well as Mobilize. Uh-oh, sound the alarm. I've noticed a concern. How do we beat Ezreal Sejuani? And this is where the first issue comes up. Now, we tried a lot of versions of Fiora Gnar. Before Fiora Gnar Yordles, we actually just had Fiora Gnar, just like regular Demacia, like Tristana, Poppy, aggro, right? Like, you know, with Beagle Dust and Owlcats and that sort of thing. But nothing really worked against Ezreal Sejuani. This was the most reliably good deck, only because it was the most aggressive and was the most willing to beat them on their bad hands. But if they stick a Starlit Seer, they can positively trade into one of your units, and then they can just play Troll Chant for the rest of the game and kill all your stuff. Now, Banana Blaster wasn't in the deck when we were trying to beat Ezreal Sejuani, but Banana Blaster definitely isn't good against Ezreal Sejuani. I put Banana Blaster back in here because we're actually not going to be running Yordles. I lied to you, I wasted your time. Banana Blaster does do really well into Lurk, and I think Banana Blaster is great in this deck as a tempo tool, right? But it doesn't work here because they Mystic Shot it or freeze it, and then you spent 4 mana to develop a 3-2. But we can't beat Ezreal Sejuani with Yordles. But what can we beat Ezreal Sejuani with? This is what I brought last week. It was a Fiora deck that was really focused all in on Fiora, right? As well as River Shaper and Feyfolk. This is the exact other side of the coin. We're going to run Fiora Shen. Very much focused on Shen. We've got Shen, Kinku Student, Sacred Protector as a 3-of, Moral Support, Prismatic Barrier, and like, you know, Aegis and stuff. This is demonstrably a Shen deck, and we're keeping Shen in our mulligan pretty much every time. The way this deck wins is primarily through Sacred Protector combo, right? That's the way I built this deck to try and win. It's best seen as a Sacred Protector combo deck. How do we beat Lurk? Lurk is cheap 1 to 3 cost unit, 1 to 3 HP units, mid cost 5 and 6 HP units, and Jewelfish. The way we beat Lurk is that when they attack us with these short, small units, we can block them with our Petrosite Hound, our Fleet Feather Tracker, our Kinku Student, and like, I don't know, play a Fiora, play a Kinku Student, play a Prismatic Barrier. You've killed 2 of their units when they attacked you and you kept your stuff alive, right? That's typically how this works. Against your mid-range units, you're typically starting to get up your Fioras, and you're delaying the game until you can play your Sacred Protector. You play our Sacred Protector on 7, and you try and double attack them to death. They're forced to block some of your double attack things because they just deal so much damage. To the point where Jewelfish won't work because they've taken so much damage from that Sacred Protector combo. Especially with like Swiftwing Flight and Broadwing. Right, you're just playing Sacred Protector on 7. With Broadwing and Swiftwing Flight, it'll kill the Zerzai Doombreaker that you've either taken damage from or you're concussive palmed down. And you sort of just like take over the game from the map perspective. Once you've got your Sacred Protector and a Shen on the field, you sort of just win the game against lag. That's typically how this intends to go. Against Ezreal Sejuani, we get to use this great keyword called Formidable, right? They can't freeze formidable units, so it still strikes in. You just set up a Sacred Protector on a Broadwing or a Petrosite Hound, or even better, a Petrosite Charger, because they can't even shoot Petrosite Charger. And this thing is a double attack, you know, 4 strength unit or 3 strength unit. And then if you combine it with a twin or you combine it with a sharp sight, like, they will die if they don't block it. You've got stuff like Syncopation. And honestly, when you play Sacred Protector and you've got a Shen on field, that means you've got Shen Stand United in hand, right? So if you kept Shen on 4, they can't really kill Shen as this deck because they can't Thermo Beam it on the turn that you play it. And then you can just protect it on turns they try and Thermo Beam it, right? You just play Shen, you just play Sacred Protector, and you just beat this deck. This deck absolutely falls to the Sacred Protector combo. But sound the alarm again. I found another problem. Go Hard Build doesn't actually work against this deck. If you're a Lurk player, you might have sort of noticed this ahead of time, but losing Flock and Disintegrate is a much bigger issue than I initially led you to believe. I know, I lied to you again. How could I have done this to you? Changing these cards doesn't do well enough, and if they just play like 2 Zerzai Doombreakers or 2 Zerzai the Under Titans, while you can Vengeance, and if you have Catalog of Regrets and Vengeance, it can work, but remember, they're on Rite of Negation. They're also on 2 Ruthless Predators, and this is really important when it comes to Rek'Sai. If Rek'Sai is at 6 strength, you need to kill her before she attacks because Ruthless Predator will level her up. And that sort of issue becomes very important when you're spending 6 mana to kill a Rek'Sai, and they can possibly play another Rek'Sai, or they can play their Rite of Negation, or they can play their Pike and start going wide, and you're not able to deal with the other units that they're playing with. And while you do have Riptide for those positions, it isn't as strong. Right? Losing Disintegrate and Flock is a big deal. And honestly, not having Tibulk also really matters. Your main stabilization tool was Tibulk, right? You get Tibulk on around turn 7 or turn 8. And then it means that Go Hard heals 2, right? Vile Feast heals 2. The Undergrowth that we're running heals 3. It just works so much better. So, okay. If we think that Gwen Darius is going to be banned and Alawi Thresh isn't that strong, can we just move Gwen to Alawi? And that's what we did. We moved Gwen to Alawi, and it did improve the deck, right? We're starting to heal too when we attack. They can't really block Gwen, and the reason why Mirai Warden was here, it's going to seem weird because the timeline isn't accurate when you're looking at the deck lists. Mirai Warden wasn't in there when we were on the Thresh version, but when we went into the Gwen version, we realized that we do want to be a bit more aggressive, so we did add Mirai Warden. And we wanted to pressure them to the point where they were at 10 health, such that when we did play stuff like Alawi, they were starting to be forced to block, right? This made a lot more sense with how the deck ended up wanting to beat Lurk, right? If you run a few more units and force them to block you in certain ways, that's why Hate Spike is in the deck a little, because it is more of a surprise tempo tool. The deck worked a lot better, right? You would get them to about 10, 12 HP on turn 5, and then you'd be playing your Alawis and Zap Sprayfins, especially Zap Sprayfin with the one Holoed you get from them inevitably killing Gwen, right? That it did add up, right? And so this deck ended up being a bit more focused on playing for like a regular mid-range game plan with just a fair few control tools. And if you're thinking, hey Spidz, you've got Gwen and Alawi, you've got Zap Sprayfin and Mirai Warden, you're saying that you're trying to put them down to about 10 HP at that point. Why not just play Gwen Alawi aggro? So we went to play Gwen Alawi aggro, right? And this made so much more sense. Now, actually, Eniamor mentioned this like 3 hours before we pivoted into Gwen Alawi aggro. And he was like, hey, why don't we just play Gwen Alawi aggro? And I was like, I really like Go Hard. I want to play Go Hard. And he was like, okay. And then 3 hours later, we started playing Gwen Alawi aggro because Go Hard just wasn't working. And I think you can probably tell how this worked, right? How do you beat Lurk? You run Mirai Warden and Redeemed Prodigy and Phantom Butler and Gwen and Boisterous Host and Alawi and Jagged Butcher, right? They're forced to block you. You win. How do we beat Lurk? When they have these units, they go down to 6 HP. How do we beat Lurk? You kill them before they play Jewelfish, right? It's the exact same statement as your aggro, right? Except better, because this is not only a stronger deck, because you get to run Gwen and Opulent for you, you also get to run Mirai Warden and Redeemed Prodigy. Like, this 6 House Spider, like, combo is just, it just deals damage, and it's phenomenal. I'm going to mention a few cards that aren't in this deck. We took out the Parleys, the Make It Rains, all that sort of stuff. It's fine, but it's not that good into Ezreal Sejuani, and we felt so confident into Lurk, we just want to make sure that we're sort of beating Ezreal Sejuani. We also only run Glimpse Beyond for that sort of reason. Like, we don't need to do that much. We don't need to be playing burn spells. We're on Eternal Dances specifically for the Ezreal Sejuani matchup. And I have this joke here about we're beating Ezreal Sejuani by killing them as well. Eternal Dances really helps against Ezreal Sejuani. Remember that they only run like Thermo Beam as big removal. So Eternal Dances can get pre-committally frozen, which is okay. You can probably put a few Lurk into it though and you'll feel okay. But you're still going wide if you just like commit, I don't know, like 2 Hollowed into the Eternal Dances. Or if you commit 3, you're starting to get your Gwens back, right? The Vengeance is also there, sort of just... I've always liked Vengeance in, like, old Red Gwen. It helps against... If they do get a Sejuani or an Ezreal, like, you can just Vengeance it and you'll feel fine. Same with, like, Rek'Sai and Gwen. Like, Vengeance is fine as just, like, a, you know, just-in-case tool, right? But this deck, you just beat all these decks by killing them. So, just to recap the lineup. We've got Thresh, Darius, Noxus, Go Hard Control. We've got Gwen Alawi aggro, and we've got Furoshen, Sacred Protector combo, right? We've got a control deck and aggro deck, a combo deck. Which I think is really funny for this format, that we've got 3 different types of decks. And I was pretty happy with this lineup. It was dealing with everything that we wanted it to do. And then, sound the alarm for a 3rd time. So, Furoshen doesn't beat Lurk. And if you're a Lurk player, you probably saw this coming from a mile away. And it's mainly because of Zerzareth, Zerzo Doombreaker, and Rek'Sai, right? I can add as many Concussive Palms as I want. I can add as many Williams of Ionia as I want. This matchup won't feel great. If they play for 2 Overwhelm units, we can't kill them reliably, right? Now, we do have Concerted Strike. I could have gone up to a 2nd Concerted Strike, but you've got to remember we're also trying to beat Ezreal Sejuani here, and Concerted Strike is a massive brick against Ezreal Sejuani. It's not great against Ezreal Sejuani. If we wanted to beat Lurk more favorably, we could go 3 Concerted. We could change the deck a lot to try and beat Lurk. But fundamentally, I felt so comfortable into Ezreal Sejuani. We thought that maybe we can beat Lurk, maybe they'll miss Lurk certain turns, they won't have these units, we'll be able to go for like a Fiora win condition, which can work against Lurk. But we thought Lurk is possibly possible to beat. And that's where I sort of left it. Against Lurk, what Eniamor would typically do is that he would attack with his units, I'd block them with the Kinku Student and another unit with Barrier, and it would just work out fine. They'd attack me, I'd be able to attack them back, and then we'd end up having Sacred Protector and just be like one wider than them and be able to double combo them to death. But when Jansport played the deck, I ended up scrimming with Jansport about 8 hours before the tournament. And Jansport was just incredibly smart and just decided not to attack with Lurk. This sounds crazy, and when he predicted he would attack with Lurk, but just with one unit. And then what would happen is that I'd get to my Sacred Protector turn, and they'd be wider than me. They'd block down, they'd keep their Overwhelm units alive, they'd play Jewelfish, and I would lose. And Fiora Shen, while beating Lurk sometimes, wasn't reliably beating Lurk. But as I said, it was 8 hours before the tournament, it was time for sleep, so I just acquiesced that we're not going to be able to beat Lurk with Fiora Shen. And this is a massive issue. If you've played Best of 3 LOR, you know that giving up on just one of the matchups that you're expecting isn't how, like, the Best of 3 format works. Your weakest deck is going to be your weakest link, and it's going to be punished really hard if it doesn't beat the decks that you're fighting, right? And if you've only got 2 decks that are good into Lurk, that Lurk deck will beat that third deck, right? They're never going to ban Fiora Shen at this point, right? If we look at what happened over the course of everything, we started with Go Hard Noxus, Go Hard Bilgewater, and Yordles, with the plan of beating Lurk and Ezreal Sedge. We got rid of Yordles for Fiora Shen and kept this sort of going. But then we changed into Gwenalaoi, which worked, but we also had to admit that Fiora Shen can't beat Lurk. Had this been a different scenario, I would have gone off Fiora Shen. If I had more time to practice, I would have stopped doing Fiora Shen. Now, Fiora Shen can beat Lurk. Like, I want to keep that in mind. Like, Fiora Shen does beat Lurk sometimes. If you have Fiora plus a few barrier things, like, Fiora can threaten her win condition, right? If you do get Sacred Protector plus Shen and you have Shen plus, like, Swift Wing Flight, especially going into the 2/2s, the 4-mana 2/1s, and pulling things to the side on your Sacred Protector attack turn, like, it can work. But if they get 2 Rek'Sai procs and they have, like, an Overwhelm or 2, you can't reliably beat them. It doesn't work properly. You can increase your concussive pounds, but it doesn't happen the way you want it to. So all we had to hope was that, you know, we have to admit they don't have Lurk, but at the end of the night, I decided that I can't change my deck list. I've got too much practice, and it's better off to just run these deck lists that I've got practice into Lurk on, rather than, like, trying to create, I don't know, Fiora Pantheon or something, or some deck that is probably more reliable, right? Or a Gnar deck. Like, I'm sure you can make a Targon Ionia pile that does good into both of those decks. Like, you just run a bunch of Obliterates for the Overwhelm units. You run a bunch of, like, blockers for the early Lurk units. And then against Ezreal Sejuani, if you just run, like, 3 Sunburst, right, you'll beat Ezreal Sejuani, right? And if you just run 3 Sunburst, you'll probably beat the units. It'll have a bit of the issue that Vengeance has, but I think you could definitely build, like, a Targon deck that beats both of those decks. Maybe Targon Gnar, like, you run, like, Pokestick and Group Shot for the small Lurk units, you run Obliterates for the medium-sized Lurk units, and then you just find some sort of win condition. I don't know. You run Pantheon, and you feel fine. I'm sure you could build a way to beat those decks, but I don't have to practice on it. This is what I brought. But as long as they brought Ezreal Sejuani, we'd feel fine. This is called Foreshadowing. This is where I point out that Ezreal Draven is on their list, and this is where we go to the montage. Enjoy. Alright, you guys have just watched the montage, but I haven't seen the montage yet, so I don't actually remember exactly what happens in these games, so I'm going to be going through this a little bit slower than normal. But obviously, they ended up bringing Ezreal Draven, which was a big, like, blow, and Ezreal Draven pretty badly beats this Fiora Shen deck. And so I could have, like, seen a world where I'm supposed to ban Ezreal Draven and keep up Nora Viego, but at the time, I genuinely had no time to think about my decisions, and I thought at least I sort of played this, like, I've done Demacia into this deck before. I've never done Demacia Ionia into this deck before, but I've done Demacia into Ezreal, you know, Tribeam before. But I've never done, like, a Nora matchup with Demacia, not really. So I thought this might be better. I probably should have done this matchup in retrospect, but it was something that I genuinely didn't know. And I knew that at least this matchup would be pretty good, right? I imagine Gwen would be quite good into the Tribeam deck, but I don't know how Gwen is into the Viego deck. But obviously, like, and as you saw, like, Fiora Shen loses. And Fiora Shen loses to a few reasons. From memory, it's due to, like, how I've built the deck quite a bit. But I think I also made, like, a fair few misplays. We'll see how many I make, because I don't remember, but... I definitely remember not enjoying the positions I was in, with Fiora Shen versus Lek and Fiora Shen versus this deck. But Gwen Alawi obviously did amazingly. But let's move on. We start with Gwen Alawi versus Lek. This is my mulligan. From memory, I kicked the Gwen, and I hate myself for kicking the Gwen. I think I should have kept Gwen here. I had a 1-drop, a 2-drop. What I wanted was another 1-drop, but then I should have kicked Watchful Idol. But I think what I was trying to do is, like, in my head, I was trying to hedge my bets, right? Like, I want another 1-drop so I can do, like, Butcher into Prodigy or something, because that's a better turn than Idol into Prodigy. That way I can block a Sharkling that misses, was my thinking. For some reason, that was something that was going on in my mind. I think it would be much better just to get Watchful Idol plus Redeemed Prodigy. If they have something like Sharkling into the 0-2 that doesn't attack on their turn, then I can at least block the 0-2 with the Tentacle and sort of live with it that way. Or with the Redeemed Prodigy and just hope that they miss Lurk twice. That was sort of my issue, right? Like, I wanted a 2-2 so that I can block the Snapjaw Swarm, or that I can block their early unit, right? Because I don't want to block it with Redeemed Prodigy, because Redeemed Prodigy gets more value on the attack. Now, obviously, I can take the damage and then do the attack, but if I can avoid taking damage, that's nice, right? But I should have kept Gwen. Looking for Butcher with that much effort probably wasn't that worth it. I think just Idol, Redeemed Prodigy, Gwen is already just, like, a phenomenal hand. And I'm going to be drawing, like, 3 cards by turn 3. I'll probably have another 1-drop or 2-drop by then, so... Or even a 3-drop like C's Voice, right? So I think kicking Gwen was definitely, like, the wrong play. You can also keep Zapsprayfin, because Zapsprayfin's a good card, especially since we already have, like, a pretty much guaranteed hollowed, right? Like, Zapsprayfin will get value at some point, but with the way this deck tries to go into this enemy game, you typically want to be going wide and just dealing 10 damage when they're only dealing, like, 6 to you in the backflip or whatever, right? So... I don't know, you could have seen a world where I kicked Watchful Idol, but it is a 1-drop, and if you don't draw a 1-drop, that's much worse than having even just, like, a 1-1 on turn 1 that becomes a 3-3 on turn 4. But anyway, I kick Gwen. I'm not happy about it. I end up drawing into Mirai Warden, but, you know, these turns are pretty self-explanatory. They miss Lurk, and so I send the sad Poro emoji. But on turn 2, I decide to play Redeemed Prodigy. They end up playing the Snapjaw Swarm, but because they miss Lurk, I get this trade. And this is brutal for them, genuinely. Right? The fact that I get to get a Redeemed Prodigy hit without them applying more damage is quite good for me. And the fact that I'm able to attack with the 1-1 because I didn't let this hit my face meant that the 1-1 was also dealing damage, right? Fundamentally, them missing Lurk, like, it's Lurk. If they miss Lurk, they're further behind. Only if this were true in the Fiora Shen game. But, like, this is just a phenomenal position. Like, I'm already, like, massively favored into this matchup with the way my cards just aggro them. And the fact that I'm getting a positive trade with my 2-drop into their 2-drop, and I'm still applying pressure with it because my 2-drop is probably a better card than their 2-drop, is just, like, this one interaction pretty much says the game in, like, a single screenshot. But anyway, we can attack forward, we deal damage, they trade in, we end up drawing the Gwen, which is amazing. We do Mirai Ward and we get Bloodletters. They pull this thing, which I guess makes sense. Like, it's the only, like, positive in quotes trade they can do. I'm sure if they had any other Lurk unit, they probably would have just preferred to attack with it and get their thing to proc. I'm not entirely sure that this is right. You could, I don't know. I guess it's fine. But they get the attack in, they get Rek'Sai there. But we play Gwen, and what are they going to do? Like, they had only one opportunity to get Pyke, and that's when the Snapjaw Swarm hit. So I thought Pyke is probably not going to happen. If Pyke did happen, Pyke would have had 4 strength, I think. Yeah, because one like double Rek'Sai. So it would have been able to kill Gwen and then trade into the stuff. So Pyke would have been pretty bad, but it was a random guess at Pyke at the time, right? And even if they have Pyke, like what's my plan to play around Pyke? It's Alawi. I could play Alawi to try and get around Pyke. I don't think that's a horrible play. They might like pre-commit Pyke onto the Tentacle. But I feel like Gwen, just because she's got quick attack, because she does the 2 burn, because she heals, like Gwen is such a powerful card. I'm sure that there's a world in which you run the numbers and you figure out that it's EV positive to play Alawi here. If they've got Pyke, they can like Pyke Alawi and then trade Alawi with the 2-1 or something. But there's worlds where it's probably EV positive to play Alawi. But I played Gwen because if they don't have Pyke, this basically solidifies the game again, right? Like, it's so hard for them to come back from, like, a Gwen hitting them. Like, this says 13 right here, and they can block 2 of these units. Most of them I don't really care too much about. So we'll move on. I think I rearranged stuff here. I don't want them to kill the Tentacle. I know I've got Alawi in hand, so the thing that I want them to kill the most is Mirai Warden, right? This has extra HP. This can block stuff like if they play another Forsaken Bakai. This can, in theory, block Forsaken Bakai and makes their attacks worse, and thus I wanted to keep this around. But, you know, because of the Tentacle, like, I wanted to keep the Tentacle around because of Alawi, so that's why I decided to put that first. These trades are fine for them. I wonder if they're supposed to trade into the Tentacle here. Depends. I think they are supposed to trade into the Tentacle here, unless I have something like Ive Nakake Boras. I think it's better that they trade into the Tentacle here. Maybe they're playing around Ive Nakake Boras by not blocking the Tentacle. That way they can chump block the Tentacle on like another attack. But I don't know. Maybe this is fine for them, but it's worse into Alawi hands, right? But it's better into Ive Nakake Boras hands. And I run 3 of each, so take your pick, right? They play Rek'Sai. To me, this immediately says they've got Ruthless Predator, right? Rek'Sai with 6 strength means that they've got Ruthless Predator. That's, you know, all but guaranteed, basically. Now, you could see a world where they're feeling a little bit bricked, but it's not that they've been bricked. It's just that they, like, had bad draws, right? But the could be something like Call the Pack and, like, overwhelm units, right? But this clearly tells me they've got Ruthless Predator. This means, in my head, Gwen is already dead. Gwen has already been killed. My play here is to try and just develop as much as I can to have an amazing attack. Over the 5 and 6 mana, I've got 11 mana over the next few turns, and that's exactly enough to play out my whole hand. Now, my whole hand would be 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, 4 unit, 5 unit, and this unit here is actually a 6th unit because it summons another thing. So I can go super, super, super wide. If they do have Ruthless Predator, they will be able to develop a few 1-drops, but with the amount of wideness that we can go for, and the low HP that they've got, they also need to deal with the fact that this friend has Overwhelm and the Hollowed, like the 2 Hollowed will go into the Tentacle. I'm feeling really comfortable about my position if I can just go wide and beat them down. I am correct that they have Ruthless Predator. They do the Snapjaw Swarm just to guarantee the Rek'Sai flip. The amount of times that Aniamor did the Ruthless Predator thing and had 9 health on the Rek'Sai was quite often. Or 9 strength on the Rek'Sai was quite often. Rek'Sai levels, I decided to play Alawi into Butcher. And then we top deck Dancers. And here's where we can do a little bit of math in terms of both actions, right? So it takes 2 actions to develop both of these, and it only takes 1 action to develop this. If they have Pyke, Pyke should have enough strength to kill Dancers, unfortunately. But that one instance where they could have had Pyke earlier is the only instance where Pyke was able to be at the top of their deck. The other lurks have been a Bloodbaits that they just added to the top of the deck now, which means they do have a Bloodbait in hand, right? They do have a Snapjaw Swarm in hand. They had the Rek'Sai proc, which was 2 of them. And they had the first one that they did, right? So Rek'Sai Sharkling typically has 1 strength. So 2 come from Rek'Sai, 1 come from the Snapjaw Swarm, 1 comes from when they predicted Rek'Sai, and 1 came from that very first instance, right? So they don't have Pyke, just as a statement, which means they don't have a way of killing Eternal Dancers, which means Dancers will get you a Gwen. Because we have 2 Hollowed left. I know I'm explaining this really, really slowly. It's probably quite obvious to see just how much of the pressure matters. But I think it's, like, interesting to see that by playing Dancers, we're developing a 5 strength unit. We're developing this, which would have 3 strength. This would obviously have the 4 strength, I think, because Tentacle's got 2 strength and it becomes 4. Alawi has 6. This friend will just have 2. We will push a lot of damage in 1 action because they're only able to develop 1 unit. That makes me think this unit is better. The alternative is developing this, which does do 4 damage in 1 action, right, by just developing this, and then we can develop this after to add another 2 damage. But this multiplies the ability of Hollowed more because Gwen becomes on the field. And one of the things that makes Gwen so powerful is that while Hollowed is a good keyword, the fact that Gwen doubles that with Quick Attack. Quick Attack doesn't matter when she's ephemeral, but the point is that like Gwen being able to double the value of the Hollowed procs means that when you're developing things in an action sense, being able to increase the damage, I think is like quite powerful, right? So I decided to play the dancers here and... Oh, right, I forgot. Alawi adds +1 when she attacks. I spend a lot of time thinking about this decision. And they played Snapjaw Swarm, which is kind of unfortunate for them, because Snapjaw Swarm would have been better off trading into any other unit, right? Like, any unit at all. Snapjaw Swarm is better to trade into. Now, I could have chosen not to block in case I wanted to play around Bone Skewer, right? If they have Bone Skewer in this position, they could Bone Skewer to kill the dancers, and then, like, when I attack, I'd be dealing less damage. They could probably end up just blocking the 2 strength unit, and then Alawi doesn't need to be blocked by the Rek'Sai. So I could see a world where you're not supposed to block here to play around Bone Skewer. I think that actually might be a misplay to have blocked here at all. I should have just hit commit and then opened. My thinking was that I wanted the 2-2, which would be the thing that has the least amount of strength, to be traded off so that it doesn't deal damage to the face, and this thing doesn't block something like the dancers. Instead, one of these things blocks the dancers, right? That was my thinking, but I reckon I could have played around Bone Skewer here. What does my attack look like? My attack does 22 damage and looks like this, right? I could make that say 24, have another 2-2. They would block this here, and the Snapjaw Swarm would have blocked this. I would still be threatening lethal, guaranteedly. Yeah, I shouldn't have blocked that. I should have kept it around. Because the thing is, like, Alawi does minimum 3 damage, right? Because Rek'Sai would be the thing blocking Alawi. Which means that we're going to hit 2 things in, plus minimum 3 damage from Alawi, right? Alternatively, it can be the 3 damage blocked here, which means this is dealing 7. But if it's 3-3-2, they put Rek'Sai here. We're fine, because it's 3-3-2 and then the 2 from the skill, right? So it would be lethal either way. If they had Bone Skewer... I guess I'm talking, if they had Bone Skewer, they would also be able to do Bone Skewer now, right? As opposed to Bone Skewer on the stack. Like, on the stack in the previous action. And plus, if they did Bone Skewer there, the 2-2 would have stayed alive. This is a bit more complicated than I gave it credit for. Alright, let's say they had Bone Skewer in this position, right? They had the unit, we didn't block with the thing, but they had Bone Skewer. They would block this, they'd block that with Snapjaw Swarm, they'd kill Gwen, they'd kill Alawi with Bone Skewer. They'd stay alive. I guess Bone Skewer keeps them around no matter what. It's the result they have, right? Because either they Bone Skewer this friend, right? And that means we only have the 2-2 and the Tentacle and the Alawi, which means we're not threatening lethal. Although we're dealing a fair bit of damage, which is kind of funny. Or... yeah, okay. Bone Skewer doesn't matter in the sense that I'm not killing them if they've got Bone Skewer, right? So they're just not dying if they've got Bone Skewer. If I wanted to get the best result despite a Bone Skewer, my inclination is to say that I want to pass so that I can still get the Gwen. But I think Rek'Sai would stay alive either way. So I think if they've got Bone Skewer plus another Overwhelm unit, I probably am losing the game. Which is interesting. If I didn't play Dancers, would I be able to beat Bone Skewer? My inclination is no, because they'd be able to develop units and have Bone Skewer. So look, I know I've talked a lot. This isn't particularly thorough because I haven't watched this game back yet by doing the montage. But my inclination is that in the event that they've got Bone Skewer, I probably just lose the game no matter what I play. Even if I develop stuff like Zap Spray Fin or the Redeem Prodigy. Like, going wide is fine, but I'm not doing the 2 damage on the stack, and they might have 4 blockers, and the Bone Skewer would get rid of the 5th blocker. Or the 5th attacker, and even if they've only got 3 blockers, the Bone Skewer still wouldn't do the Bone Skewer would still prevent the damage. I think I'd probably deal more damage if I went wide, but it wouldn't be a lethal amount, is my inclination. Yeah, I think Bone Skewer would let them have lethal here just with Rek'Sai and any other Overwhelm unit. If they didn't have another Overwhelm unit, we could probably win the game just by going a little bit wider and having Zap Spray Fin as an elusive header, right? So I think in the event that they don't have an Overwhelm unit, but they flip Rek'Sai, right? Like, the chance that they've got Zozai Doombreaker or Zozai the Undertitan is relatively high. So, I don't know. In the event of Bone Skewer, we can't win, I don't think. But we win the first game, and then we move on to game 2. where we start losing a lot. And let's talk about why. The first thing is that this deck is built really interestingly. I think there's worlds where you can keep Prismatic Barrier, but I think in those worlds are the worlds where you need to already have Kinky Student or Fiora. I think Prismatic Barrier is not bad. I think you could see a world where I keep one Prismatic Barrier, but what my fear was that I wouldn't draw any units and I just die anyway. And I don't know if I kick Broadwing. I do kick Broadwing. I think I wanted a higher chance of hitting Shen or a 1-drop. I don't really need a 1-drop because deck can develop on 2 as well. Like, they don't need to attack instantly, or if they do, like, playing a 1-drop isn't going to prevent them from attacking, so I probably could have kept Broadwing, and Broadwing would have traded into everything they wanted to do on 2. So I reckon Broadwing was actually supposed to be a keep. And I could see a world where Prismatic Barrier is a keep, but in this position, I've got the Shen, which feels great, but nothing else which feels good. Now, Shen replaced the space of Broadwing, so it would have been Shen or Broadwing, but I think Broadwing would have been better than Shen in this position that we find ourselves in, especially with Bright Steel Protector, right? But this hand is a little bit awkward, right? We've got Syncopation, which doesn't do much in this matchup. It's more for the Ezreal Sejuani matchup, but trying to go for surprise lethals. Now, it does help against this matchup a little bit, but only for when you're on turn 7, right? Like, Syncopation is for a turn 7, turn 8 play for trying to go for the surprise lethals with Shenbei. So, I don't know. Syncopation could have been cut, I think. I think I was trying to be too cute with Syncopation in general, but that's a story for a different time. They do Sharklings. I don't know whether to play Bright Steel or not. I decide to, but they miss Lurk, so I decide not to do the trade. I don't know if that's entirely right. What my thinking was that I wanted to block the Snapjaw Swarm, but if I block this, it's pretty much the same sentence as blocking Snapjaw Swarm. Like, I'm preventing 1 damage, so there's a reason to block this. The other reason not to block this is if I get Kinku Student, like Barrier plus this, and then Kinku Student will let me block stuff more. That's why I decided not to, but I don't know if that's entirely the right play. And then look, we've got our 3 barriers. Barriers are fine, but we need things to combo with them. You might look at the deck and think there were too many on-play barriers, and I think I'm inclined to agree, but if you imagine this position where we've got a Fiora, right, one of the ways we win this game, or a Kinku Student, is one of the ways we win this matchup, like, one of the few ways we can win this matchup is protecting ourselves from their attacks by having the barriers, or at least threatening the barriers, right? We need to be able to threaten that at the very least. So having barriers for instances where we have Fiora Kinku Student is important, but this is an instance where we have our threats, things that threaten them from attacking, but nothing that actually hurts them when they do attack. I barrier here sort of as like a need to. I can't get away with not barriering here, I don't think. But I also, like, I don't really think I can take this 1 damage, would be 2 damage, which would be 3 damage if, like, on and on and on. I think I just need to do that, but they decide to open. I decide not to block because I got the Kinku Student. So I've got these 2 units that I can keep around, and I wanted to threaten something, right? Like, I wanted to not moral support here. I wanted to threaten things that could happen later on with Kinku Student, Shen, and moral supports and blocks. Now, I could have moral supported there. I could have made that thing be defensive, make it defend, I play Shen next turn, and then I play Kinku Student on the turn after. That was possibly a line, or I could play Kinku Student next turn and play Shen on the turn after, which I think isn't a bad line, right? I moral support there, I pass, I Kinku Student. If they try and do stuff next turn, I moral support, prevent it. And if they develop ever, I do Shen. That might be a more reliable line. I think that makes sense, but this was a really awkward position that I hadn't found myself in too regularly. Now, you might think, Spidz, what positions did you find yourself in if this wasn't the ones that you found yourself in? But I found myself having a lot more 1-drops, right? I think I was running 5 or 6 at one point. I cut it down to 4 because I added like a 1 or 2 more 2-drops at the time. But I found myself often having like 1 or 2 more units, so I could find like trading off like these less important units more valuable. Like, that was something I could justify earlier. But I think with the way I slightly tweaked the deck, that wasn't as justifiable because I wanted to make it slightly better into Ezreal Sejuani. Because remembering my logic was, at least I'm good into Ezreal Sejuani, right? And like, I can probably give up on the Lurk matchup just a little because it seemed to be too unreliable to win, even if I teched a little bit for it, right? Which makes sense, right? Like, Lurk is supposed to beat these Demacia decks. This was probably the most likely Demacia deck to beat a Lurk deck. That isn't like trying to use quick attack a lot, but whatever. I could have played Elites, by the way. I know Elites was an option to me. That was something that was suggested to me quite a bit, to just play Elites, but I did not want to. I play Kinku Student here. You might ask why. I wanted to like threaten damage. That sounds weird. It is weird. But I felt as if I needed to at least do some sort of pressure so that if I do get the Spirit, Boatman, I'm able to try and go for lethals, especially with the syncopation. I don't know if that was entirely accurate. I think I could have tried to stall out the game a little bit more, especially with all these stall tools, right? I've got an anti-pike answer. I've got barriers for things like just them trying to attack me. It doesn't work that well into the overwhelm things to just pass down a lot, but I'm already like in a really bad position that I can't really justify that. But had I done moral support, kept that unit alive, passed, played Kinku Student, if they play Pike, I could barrier, and then do Shen, that would be a lot better. I played Kinku Student, and one of the things I noticed when I was thinking about playing Kinku Student is that if they play Pike here, I probably just lose, right? I could have thought about that more when deciding on the block, but I only started making those thoughts after I'd already decided on the block. And once I had done the block, I thought, well, I can't play Shen and Kinku Student on the same turn, so I guess I'll do Kinku Student now so I can play Shen next turn. But this lets me die to Pike, and at this point I just said, yeah, I'm probably dying to Pike, aren't I? And I just acquiesced it. I know that's not a particularly, like, smart way to play the game. Just like, okay, if they got Pike, I lose. Especially when I was able to play around that by playing moral support on the Bright Steel Protector. But at this point, I said if they've got Pike, I lose. I need to develop some sort of board, and that includes playing Kinku Student this turn, so that I'm not just playing Shen next turn. They're going, like, a little bit wide and killing me, right? But they've got Pike, and then I sort of just lose the game from now. Not only is my anti-Pike spell bricked, right? Like, this only is here to beat Pike. That's why it's in the deck. It's there to beat Pike. They're also going wide. I don't have much I can do. I play Shen, but it doesn't really matter. I attack and threaten stuff, but... Look, we can go through the game. I do this because I need to survive, but I don't have any units, right? I've just... And you can probably watch this from the VOD, right? Like... I'm going to lose. This is a lost game. I chose barrier over deny. Why did I do this? I think I wanted to threaten maybe Shen level. Or I had more barriers than I had deny, so if they got a second Pike, I'd rather deny that Pike. Something like that, but I could have used the deny. A lot of these plays don't matter too much, and they're pretty self-explanatory. I go for the Pike kill because I've got a plan for this unit, which is to block it with the friend. They do this. I'm forced into double denying. I don't really have a play, but look, just if you look at my hand, I draw 4 units this game. That's partly because of how I built the deck. I built the deck to be slightly bigger on spells, but none of my formidable units, none of my early units, whatever. I definitely misplayed by not protecting the Bright Steel Protector. This could have been a very different game had I done that. Had I also kept the Broadwing and Mulligan, this would have been a slightly different game. But there's not much you could have expected me to do, right? Like, once they do this, once I'm forced to double deny, they do their little shocked emoji, I've lost, right? Like, what is my game plan? That's over. Props to Mafraju. Mafraju, I think that they probably played this fine. They missed Lurk, and it felt pretty bad for them, but I didn't have the hand that could punish that. I needed Fiora, especially. I think Fiora would have done really well in this game had I played around playing with Fiora properly. Shenboat would have been nice, but I didn't have the position where I could threaten stuff with Shenboat because I needed those early units to block them down so that I can go wide. But this matchup, it's worse and worse. It got worse and worse the more I scrimmed it, but I was still hanging onto the thread that early on when we were scrimming, it felt pretty decent in all honesty. But that's what happened. And then we're getting into what is honestly like a worse matchup, right? Which is this one. We start with this. I decide to keep Broadwing and Disciple. My thinking was that Kinku Student is really susceptible to just dying to Mystic Shot and Static Shock. And what my thinking was that is I want to apply as much pressure as possible. And I thought, look, Broadwing does get Mystic Shot and become a 0-1, but they don't have block meter in this game. This is a Plants vs. Zombies reference. If I just get a bunch of early units, I can try and smog them. And I thought that would be my best way of winning. Get early units and smog them. Kinku Student is an early unit, but it's much more susceptible to things than I'd like to have. I think I probably should have kept Kinku Student though. I think I was looking at this too much as barrier synergy and not enough as just a 2-mana 3-1. I look at this card and I think, oh cool, Shen synergy. And I didn't look at this card and what I should have done in this matchup and just look at it as a 3-mana 2-1. I kept Twin Disciplines to try and like beat stuff like Mystic Shot when I'm going in for lethals. And you know what? I do draw a little bit of an early curve. And then they draw House Spider and I lose the game. I could have not attacked if I wanted to, but I think if I kept passing down the board, I'd probably end up losing. I obviously end up passing down the board quite a bit towards the middle of the game, but I don't think I would do well if I kept passing down the board, and I try and win. not successfully. I probably should have played Bright Steel Protector. I thought Bright Steel Protector, what it might do is do something like I play Shenboat on turn 7, and then I do Bright Steel Protector on turn 8 to protect it a little. That would be worse into like Arachnoid Sentry, but I thought that might be one of the ways I get through stuff like Disintegrate, which was one of the cards I was thinking about a lot right now. Is how do I beat Disintegrate later on? And I need the barriers to do that. I think that was probably short-sighted. I probably should have just gone aggro and tried to threaten that win condition. Like, do Bright Steel Protector. If they play Stun Spider, do Concussive Palm and just, like, aggro them as much as I possibly can. Because I can't outvalue them. I just won't be able to, especially, like, post-Tibulk. And without stuff like Shenboat or Shen in hand, I really can't justify that. But they start playing cards. They play Flock. I think about protecting this unit. But I decide, okay, I can't go for this aggro plan anymore. I didn't draw the stuff that lets me go for an aggro plan, which was going to be unlikely anyway, so I thought, alright, let's try and go for a Fiora combo plan or a Shenboat plan. Right, at this point, I've decided, okay, look, my hand has a bunch of these cards in it that are control cards, or are, like, mid-range combo cards. I have to go for that plan. Maybe I should have thought about that ahead of time. Like, I should have just mulliganed, like, fully for Fiora and not kept any of those units and just gone for Fiora. But that's contingent on them not having House Spider, right? Like, if they didn't have House Spider, the aggro plan probably would have worked a little bit more successfully. But, I don't know. Like, if you think about this in the long term, by turn 6, I'm probably not threatening lethal, right? My deck doesn't have the ability to threaten lethal. And I don't have over-the-top rent, so I can't justify that. At some point, I'd be transitioning into a mid-range control plan. So probably going for aggro wasn't necessary. So what I said earlier was probably wrong. I probably should have never gone for an aggro plan. I probably should have gone in for an all-in Fiora game plan or something against a deck that runs Disintegrate and Flock. Like, it'd be very rare that it works, but at least that'd probably be what the best chance of winning is. But our hand is fucked, right? 2 Concussive Palms, which are there purely just to make Rek'Sai sad and also to, like, stun the Sejuani. Concussive Palm doesn't do anything against this deck. I can hit a Tibulk with it, but it doesn't do anything against this deck. And the hand doesn't really develop anything. I've lost. I genuinely thought about, like, doing these 2 cards on this unit to try and, like, threaten damage, but that's not how I win, right? I draw Concussive, I draw William, I can't do anything, so I just continue passing. I draw Shenboat, but they play Ezreal, which is a really well-timed Ezreal play, and I think a lot about this decision. I decided to play Bright Steel Protector. My hope is that they would be scared of Sharpsight. I do run 2 Sharpsights, so my hope was that if I barrier the Flick Feather Tracker, they'd be so scared of Sharpsight that they would just pass, and then I get to play Boat, and then hopefully win. And my fear for playing Boat was that they'd just play a bunch of stuff and kill Boat, and I wouldn't have enough resources to defend it. And I wanted to keep it for the next turn to try and maybe threaten, like, at least 1 or 2 more resources. But I don't know. Boat was very likely to die without anything that would combo with it, right? I decided to let this happen. I thought I could threaten the Mystic Shot plus the Twin Disciplines, but it loses to literally just, like, 2 pings. And I thought, I'm not going to beat that. Maybe I should have done that anyway and just said I have to get the pings out of them eventually. But I don't know. Look, like, by this turn, I feel like I've lost, right? By the time I get over here, what am I expected to do? Yep, they do this. They stun the thing. I try and kill Ezreal, but at this point, the boat is dead. I try and protect it. Try and run them out of resources. They kill the boat. You know, at this point, I'm like, cool, I've ran them out of resources a little. I've drawn a Shen and I've drawn a Fiora. Maybe I can accomplish something. I play Shen to try and block the thing. There was a long time where I thought maybe I'd Concussive Palm this unit. And this is where you're going to find... This is maybe where you find the least happy thing that I do, I guess. I play Fiora because I thought Thermo Beam does 3. I know it would be 3+1. I get that Tibulk works like that now, but I thought Thermo Beam overrode Tibulk. Don't ask me why, but I thought Fiora can't die here, so I'll play Fiora and then protect her, because she can't die to Thermo Beam. I could have played Fiora next turn. I didn't know that she would die to Thermo Beam. But I play Fiora, she dies to Thermo Beam. I learn how Thermo Beam plus Tibulk interact. You might think, Spidz, how did you not know this? Genuinely, I'd never seen it happen before, I don't think. Or if I had, it was when Tibulk released, and I haven't fought Tibulk PNZ. You might think, Spidz, Tibulk PNZ was like the linchpin of the meta before the variety patch. I didn't really play during then. I never saw this interaction. So I lose Fiora. And then, like, what? I need to draw another Fiora to win. I pass here. I don't know. I play the Kinky Student. They do Tri-Beam. I try and keep my unit alive. I know I can probably... I think about concerted striking, but it seemed interactable. I don't know. I probably shouldn't have been so scared about them interacting me. Right? They will at some point, whenever I play concerted strike, will be when they interact with me. I should have just admitted that and moved on. I could have not blocked the doggo to try and play around like barrier destroying stuff. I was pretty defeated at this moment, and honestly, I don't really think there is that much of a way to win. But I could have played better towards my outs. I could have done a concerted strike here to try and, like, tamper the board a little bit more. I could have, like, when I, like, not done this blunder, for example, I could have done concerted strike on this Tibok ages ago, right? I had options that I was too scared of their interaction. I think, having never done this matchup before, or for a long, long time, it's been forever since I've done Demacia against Noxus Control, and typically against that I would be playing Sivarakshan, which plays completely differently to how this deck plays into Noxus decks. Like, typically I can apply a lot more pressure, and I'm pressuring them constantly as Sivarakshan. With this deck, I'm not actually applying pressure ever. So it's completely different in how I need to think about that matchup. And I need to think about it as admitting that they've got interaction points and trying to run them out of that, I think, as opposed to what I was trying to do, which is to try and find points where I can beat them despite their interaction points. And I think that just wasn't the right game plan, right? And so, like, I could talk about every single individual play where I'm making that issue, but all of them can be summed up as I decided that not playing around the interaction points, not letting them do their interaction points wasn't the right mindset, right? I should have just let them do it and then try and beat them despite that, right? Anyway, I play both of my concussives to try and threaten damage, I guess, because I realized that maybe I can. They do Tri-Beam, I try and protect it. They do Scorch Death. I can no longer attack with Fiora. I play Shen again. I do the concerted finally. It kills the thing. I lose my Fiora. None of this matters. Nothing from here on out matters, right? I could go through the plays individually. I'm sure you could try and work something out, but I think all of these plays are the best play I make with my mindset, but the best play is going from 0% to 0%, right? I think back in the mulligan, I could have decided that I needed to go all in for Fiora and mulliganed literally everything and just gone for Fiora and said hopefully they don't have 2 disintegrates at once or something, or don't have disintegrate Mystic, or that I've got deny for that disintegrate Mystic, but look, I'm not a pressure deck. This wasn't ever supposed to be a pressure deck. This was supposed to be an all-in combo deck. And that's how it beat Ezreal Sejuani. It beat Ezreal Sejuani by them not being able to kill Shenboat and then just Shenboating them to death. And it beat Lurk by having barriers on those rare occasions where we actually had those hands that made it work. I shouldn't have brought this deck, right? I hinted towards this at the end of the Google Slides section. I think there are a lot of other decks I could have brought. I could have brought Elites, right? But I could have also brought some sort of like Targon pile. Like a Targon Bandle City pile that pings off the small units and then has some sort of, you know, maybe even an invoke win condition, right? Just invoke big things that destroy, you know, the big Sejuani or the big Ezreal, right? Like, I think I could have done that. I think I could have just done Nah invokes, and I think that would have actually done pretty decently, right? I can block down the stuff for Lurk, I can kill off their units. Against the other deck, I can, if I want, I can run Buster Shop. That probably isn't necessary, right? All I need is a way of killing, like, a few of those units. That can even just happen through, like, I don't know, Nah, or something like that. Or just apply, like, a little bit of pressure. Or have, like, 1 or 2 units that can block. And then just, like, obliterate Sejuani and stuff. I'm sure that would have done better. But I needed the foresight of knowing that Lurk and Fiora Shen wasn't as good as the early screams made it be. And by the time I had those later screams that made me realize it was so bad, it was 1 AM and I had to go to sleep because the game was in 7 hours. You might see that I've lost twice out of 3 weeks, and I put a lot of effort into prepping, and the prep has always involved one deck that was a little bit awkward, and think, Spidz, you're not... This isn't a successful thing you're doing. You're not successfully analyzing properly what they're bringing. And I think to an extent that's true. Right, even the Nah Darius deck, I think, in retrospect, I could have changed that a lot. I could have added Culling Striker. I could have just made it an aggro deck, right? It feels less smart to do it that way, and one of the things that I want to do is practice deck building and practice analyzing. But obviously, it hasn't had that good results recently. I think that's something I can improve on, and I'm hoping that by the end of these 8 weeks, I've developed this skill a little bit better. But you're watching me in my infancy of developing this skill, right? The only times I've ever built decks in LOR is fun decks, right? It's only ever been Taskmaster Von Yep, Sojourners plus pretty much every single fucking region, right? From Piltover to, like, Shurima, which doesn't have support cards, but I love Sojourners. And I've never tried to really make this competitive fully outside of Taskmaster, which I've tried to make Taskmaster work quite a bit because I just love her. She's so cool. So this is my first foray into trying to do this competitively. So if you see me make these stumbles, right, this is part of me discovering this for the very first time, right? I do hope that I can improve a little bit more. Hopefully I can make it further in future. But this is as far as I've made it for now. Good job to Mafraju for changing your deck list. It's something that I thought they might bring Ezreal Sejuani, as I pointed out. Sorry, Ezreal Draven. Like, that was probably the 4th most likely deck I thought they would bring. And they did bring it, and I'm not surprised by it. I could have developed less specifically in Ezreal Sejuani, but that only looks bad in retrospect. It only looks bad once I learn about the lack of lurk thing, right? Anyway, enough rambling. Hope you guys enjoyed this. And I shall see you next week where we're fighting. I'm back to... I need to check now because I forgot. CDS, game schedule. Next week, it is week 4. I fight Made in Heaven. I fight Absolution in week 4. Cool. I shall see you then. Enjoy.